I'm not quite sure why Renault brought us to these beautiful driving roads in Nice to test drive the new electric Renault 5, because let's face it, you've already made your mind up. And I suspect that you already think it looks amazing, because everybody I talk to, everybody I've seen, everybody I show the car to thinks, wow, that's so cool. And to be fair, you don't even need to remember the original to appreciate it. I think you just look at it and go, the proportions are good, the detailing are good, it looks modern, it's the right size as well for an electric city car, and it just so happens to be a throwback to the original Renault 5 of the 1960s and 70s. There's a lot to look at in design. I know we did a preview video in the studio, but seeing it here in daylight kind of reinforces just how right the design is. Some of the detailing, these headlights, they look a bit like the originals, but they're obviously very, very modern using LED technology. When you start the car, this car actually winks at you. It's a little bit cheesy, I know, but look, it's a happy looking car and I think it'll appeal to people that love that. Little detailing as well. You've got a little French tricolour in here. Got these 4-point fog lights, very distinctive, very, very modern. That sits very well with the retro design of the car. The charge indicator up here. Now, it's not functionally of very much use, I know, but it refers back to the original placement of an air vent that was there in the original car, and it's kind of a nice little touch, and it kind of goes along with the retro-futuristic design theme of the car in general. All versions of the Renault 5 will sit on 18-inch wheels and different designs, of course. This one's got a 12-spoke version, which is a bit like a clock, and on one of the spokes is the number 5, so 5 o'clock, Renault 5. There's a lot more to see. The profile is very like the original, but yet it's also thoroughly and modern and up to date. It's less than 4 meters long, so it's a compact enough car. It's very much a city car, bear that in mind. I love this contrasting roof and this red detail line here. That harks back to the original Renault 5 Turbo, and so does the shape of the roof spoiler there. You can get that in other colours. I suggest stick with the red personally. The rear door handles are hidden in here, and it kind of adds almost a coupe look here and enhances this haunch, if you like, and gives a bit more stance on the road. But the big talking point back here is these oblong lights. They hark straight back to the original, but in a really modern way. And the same for the whole slope of the hatch at the back. Yes, it looks like the original, but it just looks good. So anybody who never seen the original will look at this and go, yeah, that's a stylish looking car. I love this little strip across here, and the number 5 is given massive prominence. And we were shown the new Renault 4 this week at the Paris Motor Show, and that theme continues with that. So that's another car that is a vaguely retro throwback, but very, very modern. Just looks great, doesn't it? The interior continues with that mix of modern and retro. So you've got this big digital dashboard in front of me, digital instrumentation, of course, and a lovely touchscreen in the middle here. That's backed by Google, and it's very, very snappy and quick to use. And if you use Google and you have a Google account, it interfaces with that very well. But then that's mixed with retro cues. So we have this padded dashboard, which is unusual maybe, but it looks nice as well. It's a bit retro, and this material is denim-like. All the upholstery that you can get in the Renault 5 is recycled, so there is a sustainability message there from Renault, but yet it's also nice to touch and it looks good. These seats are actually inspired by those of the Renault 5 Turbo, so we've got this distinctive H shape, and they actually hug you quite well here. They hold you in place, but they also look nice. The top slick model comes with this heather yellow detailing and some extra Renault 5 logos, which looks particularly good. But I also like this roof. The headlining is actually textured, and I don't know, it's just an extra touch, isn't it, that it makes the car feel more welcoming. Now, buyers that are looking at this car and thinking, ooh, I might even fit the family into it, just temper your expectations a little bit, because this is a relatively small car. It's a city car, and while rear legroom is pretty good for that sector, it is not a big family car. Yep, there are ISOFIX points here for child seats, but good luck getting big, bulky, rear-facing child seats in here without having to really push up these seats. Nonetheless, you can get 3 people back here if you have to. So 3 young, flexible people, no bother. There are reading lights back here, which is a very neat little location for them. And you get a good view of what's going on up front. It is a city car, as I mentioned, but the boot isn't tiny. Officially, it holds 326 litres of luggage, whatever that means. So for reference, a Volkswagen Golf holds 380 litres. That's always a good reference point. And there's this underfloor section here where you can put the charging cables. Those back seats split and fold down. There's a bit of a step when you do so, but it's still useful for carrying big loads. Not bad for a city car. Now, I know we said you've probably made your mind up from the design, from the style, and who could blame you, to be honest. But as we're here, I might as well tell you how the car drives. annoyingly well. It's very hard to find fault with. It's really polished, really well judged. Where to start? The steering. Even around town, you notice it's very direct and there's a bit of communication through it. When you're up in the mountains, up in the hills here, you can feel what's happening. And sure, it's easy enough to spin an inside front wheel a little bit because there's lots of torque down low, but it's all very well controlled, and that directness adds to the agility, adds to the fact that it's nimble. What next? The brakes really deserve a mention. Now, lots of electric cars have issues with trying to balance friction braking and regenerative braking, and you know, it's a bit inconsistent. This is not. This is just perfectly judged again. The brake pedal feels solid, feels dependable, and it has no trouble when you're coming down to a stop to balance that. There's no jerkiness, there's no anything really. It just smoothly works, and these are the unobtrusive aspects of driving that people don't realise, don't notice if you like, but they all add up to a car that is very smooth and easy and nice to drive. Smoothness, refinement, those are two words that describe this car very well. So on the motorway, you notice in particular, you never hear the electric motor and the wind noise is kept at bay. Everything's really smooth. And the suspension is also really well judged. Here we're going through a little bit of a town, there's some speed bumps, and it just kind of goes over them. It's really comfortable for any car, and this is a city car, so it's particularly good in town. And of course, I mentioned earlier about the 18-inch wheels, so all cars come on those, and that's quite clever because it means that the ride comfort is always predictable, you know what you're getting. Of course, what also adds to that is the lightness of the car. Renault's done a really good job of keeping the weight of this car down, and you can feel it everywhere. It's, as I said, it's agile feeling, it's quite nippy for the performance, and it's decent to drive everywhere. It rides bumps well, and yet it also corners really well. It's really good fun. It's worth touching on the performance, of course. There's two different versions going to be offered. There's a 150 horsepower motor and a 120 horsepower motor, both front wheel drive, all automatic of course. It's an electric car, and 150 horsepower is plenty. That's what we're driving here today, plenty in this car. It feels nippy, as I said, and yet it doesn't feel out of its depth on the motorway, so it's a good all-rounder. I think the 120 horsepower car will be absolutely fine as well. I think more important to buyers would be the batteries. So there's a 52 kilowatt hour battery and a 40 kilowatt hour battery, and there's a range of up to 410 kilometers, which is more than most people will expect, and certainly more than most people need, certainly from a city car or a smaller car like this that is probably going to be used more in the city. In terms of recharging, the bigger battery can charge up to 100 kilowatts on DC charger, on a DC charger, and the smaller battery is a bit slower, up to 80 kilowatts. All cars can charge up to 11 kilowatts on AC power, which is quite useful for curbside charging, etc. So there you have it. That's how it drives. It's actually brilliant. It's kind of Mini-esque, if you like, in its agility and its fun to drive characteristics, but that's mixed with a bit more suppleness and comfort and quietness. It's refined. It does it all. And oh, last thing is the energy consumption. This is average today 16.2 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers in our time. We've done quite a bit of driving in around the mountains and urban routes, very, very mixed. So that's pretty good going, and that again shows the benefit of a low weight. So that's our first review of the Renault 5. As I said at the top, it's almost irrelevant that the car is actually brilliant to drive, and it's almost irrelevant what we think of how it drives on these great roads. The range is decent for an electric car. It's quick enough by any measure, but just look at it. It is super cool. This is going to be hot property. If you want to know more about the Renault 5, you can read all about it on our website. It's CompleteCar.ie, and it's a great resource for choosing your next new car.